Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Monday Browns show, the morning after a Browns win here today on cleveland.com. Browns 26-24 winners over the Atlanta Falcons. I am Dan Labbe, and Chris Fedor will be joining me shortly via phone as we will break down the Browns win over the Falcons, an improbable win, a game they probably had no business winning, but thanks to some questionable coaching decisions by Mike Smith, the Browns had an opportunity at the end, and they won the game. And now let's bring in Chris Fedor. And Chris, I don't know how many times we've asked this after a Browns win. How do you feel after that win? I'm not sure.
I feel dirty, Dan. No, I mean, I think it's really interesting because I think what that game showed me yesterday, and yeah, there was a lot of bad coaching going on for both sides, actually. I thought Mike Pettin had some baffling decisions. But what that game showed me is just the growth of this Browns team. If your quarterback can play like slop for 3.5 quarters, and you have to deal with some significant injuries going into the game with Carlos Dansby, Jabal Sheard clearly not 100%, then you lose to Sean Gibson, and you still find a way to win that game, that's what you have to do if you want to be considered a playoff team. And there have been a lot of frustrating moments for this team this year. The game last week against Houston was very frustrating. The game on the road against Tennessee, the Jacksonville game comes to mind. Even yesterday, for moments, it was very, very frustrating. But I think it shows the growth of this team and how far they've come in the last couple of months, that they were actually able to win a game like that when they didn't have a lot going right for them.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that. At the same time, this just felt like another one of those games, and yeah, I'm not trying to be a downer because this team is 7-4, and that means something. That means a lot that this team is 7-4, and that they're in the playoff hunt and they're in the divisional hunt. But again, it just kind of keeps coming back to, if they weren't playing the Falcons yesterday and they weren't playing that coach making those decisions at the end of the game, I just don't know. I mean, I don't know that they win that game. Now, look, you play who's in front of you. You deal with the situations that happen, and the Browns took advantage of mistakes. But, yeah, I mean, I'm kind of with you. It just feels sort of dirty, I guess, to celebrate this win because I'm not sure how it happened. I don't know that I feel any better about the Browns today than I did after they lost to the Texans. I certainly don't feel good about some of the games coming up on the schedule, not necessarily Buffalo, but then you come home for Indianapolis and Cincinnati. I don't know that I feel any better about those games today than I did after they lost to Houston.
Right.
I think they took advantage, but they also got that game gift-wrapped a little bit for them. And again, we've seen Browns teams in the past not take advantage of that. So give Brian Hoyer credit at least on that final drive. Give his receivers a ton of credit. And thank the Falcons for giving the Browns an opportunity to win that game.
Yeah, Dan, I kind of feel like you too, and I understand exactly where you're coming from. It's kind of what I said for the Tennessee game. That Tennessee game bothered me because I felt like that was a game that the Browns won not because of the Browns. I felt like that Tennessee game was a game that the Browns won because of Tennessee. And there's a little bit of that in yesterday's game. I feel like the only reason the Browns had a chance to win that game late was because of some errors by Atlanta, a few errors by Atlanta. And I would rather win games more frequently when it's because of what you did well or what your team did well or because Brian Hoyer was terrific and he outplayed Matt Ryan or because the Browns secondary came up and made some big-time plays and they were the reason. They intercepted a pass late in the game. It wasn't a coaching blunder by the other team because the truth is, if there is a better coach, and Mike Smith is on the hot seat because this is the second time he has done this year, Dan. The second time he has cost his team a game with a decision like this. If there's a different kind of coach, I agree with you. If it's a top 10 coach, the Browns certainly don't win that game against Atlanta.
Yeah, and, just baffling decision. Mike Smith did it. Ken Wisenhunt did it. You go back to that Tennessee game that you mentioned. Again, Oakland, early in that game, coaching mistakes. When they were driving down the field, they decided to get cute. It's a little bit baffling, but at the same time, the Browns took advantage of it. They won the game somehow, some way. Mike Pettin made some mistakes yesterday, too. He didn't have his best game. I thought Kyle Shanahan, again, didn't have his best game. So not only did the Browns take advantage of some gifts from the Falcons, but they overcame some things that they were putting in their own way, too.
Yeah, and the number one thing they overcame, and I don't know why we haven't gotten to this yet, number one thing that they overcame was their quarterback being pretty much garbage for 3.5 quarters. And that's rare for an NFL team to be able to do those things. Usually if your quarterback's going to play like that, Dan, for 3.5 quarters, it's done. It's over with. You try and regroup and you focus on the week after. But because of the way the Browns ran the ball, Isaiah Crowell was terrific yesterday. I thought he ran really, really well because of the Browns defense creating some turnovers, forcing Matt Ryan into some bad decisions. He fumbled once. He threw an interception. They put pressure on him. The fact that the Browns overcame bad quarterback play, I think that speaks volumes for the rest of the team, and that just goes to show that the other areas on the field yesterday, Dan, I felt were doing a good enough job to win that game. And I think the only reason why Atlanta was in the game at the end was because Brian Hoyer was so bad. And I don't think that can be overlooked, even though he had that final drive, and it was a terrific drive. And he made some great throws there on that final drive. I don't think you can overlook how bad he was in getting to that point, and the fact that the only reason that Atlanta was in that game late was because of Hoyer. I don't like winning games, Dan, in spite of my coach and in spite of my quarterback. I want to win games because of my quarterback and because of my coach. And that wasn't the case yesterday at all.
Yeah, and you know, I talked about this with Dennis Maniloff yesterday on our post-game show. And I know you've brought this up in various spots as well. I think it's safe to say right now, and yesterday was kind of the first day where, I mean, if the Browns had lost that game, I was ready to come on this show and say, okay, maybe it's time. Maybe it's time to make that quarterback switch. I don't know if you were there yet or not. But that being said, I think we're far enough along in this process. I think we've seen enough of him last year and this year that we can say we know what the Browns have in Brian Hoyer. We know who Brian Hoyer is. And frankly, that's a guy who I would not mind having on this team as a backup. I don't know if that works anymore, if you can have him as your backup anymore. But I think we know what Brian Hoyer is. I don't think there's much more ceiling on this guy. And that doesn't mean that it's not kind of a cool story that he's worked his way into the starting quarterback job for the Cleveland Browns, his hometown team. But that ship has sailed now. Now you have to evaluate him as a quarterback going forward, and I think we know what we have.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And as the season has gone on here, Dan, and as teams start to get more and more information on Brian, we're starting to see those warts come through a little bit more. I thought yesterday he would have one of his best games because he was playing against the 32nd pass defense, because he did have Josh Gordon back for the first time. And the truth is, he had one of his worst games. And you don't want to see that. You want to see a quarterback progressing. And I feel like Brian's regressing. And I think you're right, Dan. I think the best football that Brian Hoyer is going to play in his career is already in the rearview mirror. Whereas with the other guy, and I'm not saying that it's time to go to him now. You can't go to him now. You're in a playoff chase right now. But with the other guy, you feel like there's more to pull out of him. And I just don't feel that way with Brian at all.
Yeah, and you know, who knows if Johnny Manziel is the future or not.
Who knows?
I don't know.
Right.
I don't think anyone knows that. But I think we're going to find that out probably next season. Like you said, you can't make that quarterback switch now. There's a lot of psychology that goes into that. The quarterback position is completely different than any other position in the NFL. You make the switch after a guy leads a game-winning drive, that has a ripple effect across the locker room for a 7-4 football team. That being said, though, let's talk about some of the positives. And Isaiah Crowell, Josh Gordon, even Terrance West yesterday. Andrew Hawkins had a really great game. This offense, all of a sudden, Chris, has a whole bunch of playmakers.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Dan. And I think with the return of Josh Gordon, what has happened is you slide guys into a role that they should be in. when Josh was out, you had Andrew Hawkins trying to get open against some of these better cornerbacks in the NFL. And you had Taylor Gabriel, another guy who was trying to get open against these number 1 corners, number 2 corners. That shouldn't be the case. But now that you have Josh back, Josh is the one that's always going to see that big-time corner. Josh is the one that defenses are going to pay attention to. That's going to make things easier for Andrew Hawkins and Taylor Gabriel and Gary Barnidge and the running game as well. Because now all of a sudden you can't have that 8th guy in the box just trying to focus solely on stopping that running game the way that it has been recently. With Josh Gordon out there, even if he's not making catches then, he's making everything easier on everybody else. And you saw it on the final drive. The final drive of the game, it wasn't only Josh Gordon. It was Josh Gordon once, but it was Barnidge another time. And it was Miles Austin another time. And it was Miles another time. That's what you need. That's how you become this dangerous offense. When you have a bunch of different guys that you can rely on in crunch time, that is a good thing to have. And I feel like the Browns have that, Dan. And I feel like Andrew Hawkins is going to benefit greatly from Josh being back. And I feel like if you're in crunch time, Dan, you can throw it to Hawkins, and me as a fan, I've got confidence that he's going to make a play. You can throw it to Gabriel, I've got confidence that he's going to make a play. This is a dangerous, dangerous offense, and I feel like if you put a quarterback here, a legitimate quarterback, a long-term solution at that position, this offense has the ability to take off and go places.
Their offensive line, by the way, probably had their best game yesterday, maybe since Alex Mack went down.
Was Brian touched? Was he touched?
He got hit early in the game. I remember him taking a shot, but he was not hit very much.
Yeah.
Not at all. Not nearly as much as Matt Ryan was hit. I know that. And 2 plays that really stand out, 2 kind of bizarre plays. There was first of all, let's go to those questionable coaching decisions. So you send out Billy Cundiff for a 60-yard kick. He kicks it, leaves it way short, not even close, but Atlanta called a timeout. So you send Billy Cundiff out again, even though you know he doesn't have the leg for that kick? I don't know why Mike Pettin decided to do that. It leads to Devin Hester attempting a wild return that almost worked, if not for Spencer Lanning getting a piece of him, and Joel Bitonio, who's been incredible this year on the offensive line, covering all kinds of ground and taking Devin Hester down before he can score before halftime. Another play, Josh Gordon, they try to run a reverse, a pitch back to him. It goes over his head. He tracks it down. And a really heads-up play by Gordon to just kind of pick up the ball and just wing it down the field and throw it away. It saved the Browns maybe 15 or 20 yards. Mm-hmm. I mean, those are 2 plays that, we can sit here and nitpick Brian Hoyer, and we can, not nitpick. He was bad yesterday, and we can talk about the negatives. But those 2 plays like that, are things you look back at the end of a really good season as really little things that helped you in games that you just barely won.
Yeah, and the thing is, Dan, this Browns team has been in a lot of close games, and for the rest of the season, they're probably going to continue to play in close games. Those are winning plays. Those are things that not a lot of people focus on, but those are momentum-changing plays. Those help you with field position, and I think that's what this Browns regime is trying to build. And I think when they talk about playing like a Brown, we made fun of it at the beginning of the season, like, what does that even mean? What do you mean play like a Brown? But I think that's an example of playing like a Brown, doing little things that are going to help your team win. And not every team does those things, to be honest with you. I mean, you can watch a lot of teams around the NFL, and there are wide receivers that would have picked up that ball, and they would have tried to make something out of nothing. They would have tried to get some kind of yardage. I don't think they would have been thinking, wait a minute, let me pick up this ball. I'm behind the line of scrimmage. I can throw this away. I don't think a lot of guys do that. And credit to Josh Gordon for knowing that, knowing the situation, understanding the rules. And I'm glad that you brought up Spencer Lanning, because, Dan, so many people are talking about Bitonio, and he had the tackle. But if Spencer Lanning's not in the right place at the right time, this is the second time he has saved a return for being a touchdown. The first time he got kicked in the face. Antonio Brown kicked him in the face. Saved the touchdown, though, at the time. And here's Devin Hester, one of the greatest return men the NFL has seen in the last 10 years, and he's there right in front of him, forcing him to make that extra move, forcing him to stumble so that Joel Bitonio can clean it up. Those are winning football plays. That's what you have to do when you're in close games.
Spencer Lanning has been in the middle of so many things for the Browns this year. It's been interesting. We talked about it, I think, last week with his trolling on Twitter, his tapping J.J. Watt on the head, getting kicked in the face. Yesterday, helping save that touchdown. Spencer Lanning is everywhere. All right, let's do some game balls. I'll let you go first.
Well, my first one is going to go to Spencer Lanning because I thought that was a critical moment. I thought that was a coaching blunder by Mike Pettin. I have absolutely no idea what he was thinking there. And the truth is, Dan, if the Browns are like a 3-8 team or something like that, people are focusing on that particular play as one of the cons and a reason why maybe he should be on the hot seat. Those are decisions that you simply can't make as a coach because you almost cost your team. But because Spencer Lanning was in the right spot and because he slowed down Devin Hester, the Browns went into halftime with a different kind of momentum, a different kind of confidence, and the scoreboard was a lot different as well. Spencer Lanning gets my game ball. I think he saved the game.
All right, I am going to give one to Paul Kruger, couple of sacks yesterday, and kind of give it to him as a representative of that entire defensive front. It is beat up, it is depleted, but they found a way. And K'Wan Williams, by the way, did a nice job coming off the corner a couple of times to bring pressure on Matt Ryan. But the front seven, and specifically Paul Kruger, did a really nice job yesterday bringing pressure on Matt Ryan. You even saw a couple of times Barkevious Mingo put his hand in the turf, played defensive end like back in his LSU days, and somehow got a little bit of pressure on Matt Ryan. So even Barkevious Mingo, of all people, got in on the show a little bit. Good pressure on Matt Ryan, and Ryan had a good day yesterday, but it could have been a lot better if not for all of that.
I think that's a very, very good point. So on the other side of that, Dan, I'm going to give a game ball to the entire offensive line. You and I kind of have talked about this when it comes to Brian Hoyer, when it comes to this running game. So oftentimes this offensive line is overlooked, and they are playing without the best center in the game. I don't think people understand maybe how impactful Alex Mack is, how talented he is. When you lose the best center in the game, and so many people are starting to talk about center the way that they used to talk about left tackle, it's one of the key positions along the offensive line. And yesterday, look, Atlanta's front seven is not great, and I think everybody understands that. And they don't have a dominant pass rusher like J.J. Watt. But what Brian Hoyer needs to be successful and what this running game needs to be successful, the offensive line yesterday provided it. And I thought that's part of where the game was won yesterday. The Browns' offensive line was so much better than Atlanta's offensive line. And because Brian wasn't rattled on that last drive, that fourth quarter drive, he wasn't really touched. I thought the offensive line did its job from the very beginning of that game to the very end. And those are the kinds of things that Brian is going to need moving forward and that these running backs are going to need moving forward. So the entire offensive line, to me, was a big difference in the game. Every single one of those big fellas gets a game ball from me.
All right, I'm going to give one. This is an obvious one. Isaiah Crowell deserves one. Crowell was fantastic yesterday. 2 touchdown runs, including that insane 26-yard run that looked like it was in a video game. Somebody in our, I think it was either on Twitter or in our comments chat yesterday, called it a Tecmo Bowl run by Isaiah Crowell. So I'm going to give it to Isaiah Crowell, who started again for the second straight time, held on to the football, which is really important for him, in his home state, had a fantastic game. And the thing I really love, now that Ben Tate is out of the picture, Isaiah Crowell and Terrance West, I think, are a really perfect pairing at running back for this team because Terrance West is a solid guy. He's maybe not going to have those spectacular runs, although he did have a pretty good one yesterday. I think it was in the fourth quarter. But he's a guy you hand the ball to. He's solid. When he's not dancing around in the backfield and he starts moving north and south, he can get you yardage. And then Isaiah Crowell, you see it, just that big play potential every time he touches the football. He gets my last game ball.
I'll give one more, Dan. And I know he got beat for a touchdown, and he got beat a couple of times early in the game. Joe Hayden's going to get a game ball from me because when you play against Atlanta, you understand the challenge that's in front of you. You've got Julio Jones, a top 5 wide receiver in the game on one side, and you've got Roddy White, a crafty veteran, a guy who understands how to get open, a guy who has a nose for the goal line. And I know that Joe Hayden didn't bounce back and forth from Julio to Roddy, and it's not really about that. It's just about the fact that the Browns had some guy capable of holding down, to some degree, one of the best wide receivers in the game. And we knew going into this one, Dan, that Julio was going to win his fair share, and Joe Hayden was going to have his moments. And I thought because Joe Hayden was out there, it allowed the Browns to do some extra things on defense, like bring blitzes at key moments. If you don't have a guy like Joe Hayden, you can't do that because you've got to fear that Julio Jones is going to beat whoever that other corner is, or Roddy White's going to beat whoever that other corner is. Joe Hayden's presence alone, Dan, gives the Browns options on defense. And I thought going up against a top 5 wide receiver, even though he was beat a couple of times, Joe Hayden more than held his own in that matchup.
Yeah, that's a good one. Maybe we got a little too cute with these game balls. We didn't give one to Josh Gordon. So here's an extra one for you, Josh Gordon. Welcome back.
It's like we've grown to expect that from Josh Gordon. It's like, oh, Josh Gordon was back, 8 catches, 120 yards. Yeah, that's going to happen every single week.
At some point, we're going to be looking at Josh Gordon and saying, this guy's the best receiver in the NFL.
Oh, yeah.
He's that good, that dynamic. We might already be able to say that. I don't know.
Yeah, he's in that conversation. Look, there are a lot of great wide receivers in the NFL, but the thing that I know, when they start talking about you in the same breath as Calvin Johnson and A.J. Green and Demaryius Thomas, you're good enough for me.
Yeah. He makes it look so easy, too, when he's out there.
Oh,
10 games off, he comes back, catches 8 balls for 120 yards. That's not fair. That's not fair. All right, that's going to do it for another edition of Browns Morning After. We didn't get to Tashaun Gibson. That obviously will be a big loss if he's going to be out for an extended period of time. This defense continues to get depleted. So we'll hear more about Tashaun Gibson, and I'll talk about that with Mary Kay Cabot today in a live chat at noon. So join us then, and we'll talk a little bit more about the injury to Gibson, what happened yesterday in Atlanta. Fedor, any final thoughts?
No, Dan, I just think the Browns moving forward, and we all know this, we absolutely know this, they got to play a little bit better than what they have the last 2 weeks against Houston in that loss and yesterday against Atlanta. But the good news is you walk out with that win, and every single game in the NFL is a different story, and it's a different kind of matchup. And the Browns, as bad as they looked 2 weeks ago against Houston and at times yesterday against Atlanta, they still are capable of that Cincinnati-type game. So the fact that they got this win when it looked like they had no business winning the game is the mark of a playoff team or a team that should be in contention for the playoffs. Those are the kinds of things that you have to do if you want to be in that conversation.
All right, Fedor. I will talk to you later. For Chris Fedor, I'm Dan Labbe.